Well, cars are one of the largest sources of carbon emissions, which is the primary cause of global heating. But the automotive industry is starting to change lanes, with major manufacturers churning out more electric vehicles than ever before. That's in response to growing demand from consumers as well as corporations. Paolo Montecillo reports.
As more governments relax COVID-19 restrictions, more cars are back on the road. And that's good news for companies whose business it is to help people get from point A to B. Last week, rental firm Avis reported a 15-fold surge in third-quarter earnings to $674 million compared to the same quarter last year. That, together with a pledge by management to bolster its fleet with more electric cars, saw its shares more than double in a single day. It follows a similar announcement by rival Hertz, which is buying 100,000 cars from Tesla.
The implications are huge. We could really see this just not being like a ripple in the pond. It could become a wave, and that would really show the industry overall, from both the rentals and for EV adoption, that there's a lot more here.
The deal marks a turnaround for the company. Hertz filed for bankruptcy in May last year and later delisted from the New York Stock Exchange. It's now managed to raise $1.3 billion through an initial public offering. Its shares started trading on the Nasdaq on Tuesday. For Tesla, the $4 billion sale is expected to drive demand from other customers.
For anyone who's interested in Tesla that's just never had the ability to drive one, now's their chance. And they can rent it for multiple days on end. They can see what it's like to have range anxiety or not, and how easy is it to charge.
Other car makers are also cashing in on rising demand for electric cars. Japan's Nissan swung back to profit of $500 million in the second quarter as EV sales more than doubled. Germany's BMW also reported bumper earnings, thanks partly to a 40% jump in deliveries of battery-powered vehicles. The shift away from engines that burn fuel is raising hopes the industry can lead efforts to go green.
We see a clear peak of oil demand by 2025. This is important, and this is mainly driven by what is happening in the auto industry, car manufacturing.
Electric car sales have helped companies weather the effects of the global chip shortage. And with demand only expected to increase, going green is fast becoming the most profitable route for car makers. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
For more on this, let's go to Jim Holder in Hampton. He's the editorial director at Haymarket Automotive. Welcome back to the program, Jim. Various industry analysts have put the total number of cars on roads around the world at around 1.5 billion. So they are a significant contributor to the climate crisis because most of them, as we know, run on fossil fuels. Are electric vehicles then the answer to helping to tackle the climate crisis? And how would you describe the current uptake of EVs around the world?
Absolutely. I think electric vehicles are part of the answer, and I think they're going to take time, of course, to proliferate through our car park of vehicles, as you say, over 1 billion on our roads. It's going to take time to get them off and replace them with electric vehicles. I think what's important is that there's a consensus amongst governments and lawmakers in pushing towards battery electric vehicles. There are alternatives, and there is some frustration from the car industry that alternatives are really being ruled out by this legislation. But given the scale of the problem and the level of investment needed, it probably makes sense to focus on one technology. And absolutely, battery electric vehicles can make a difference over time. It needs to be remembered that in energy terms, they take more energy to be built initially. You have to drive a number of miles before that sort of carbon is offset. But they do provide significant advantages over time. And of course, they will only get better. We're talking in combustion terms about vehicles that have been developed over 120 years. Electric vehicles, seriously, have probably only been developed over 10 years now. So there is much more to come from this technology.
We understand that a global deal to eliminate new vehicle emissions by 2040 is really struggling to attract enough support from the world's automakers as well as governments, including the US and China. And apparently a deal was due to be announced over the next few days at COP26. What do you think is stopping both corporations and governments from committing to something like that?
I think there's a lot of uncertainty about the pace of this change. It's coming very, very quickly. In the space of a decade, that the lawmakers are pushing to try and eradicate combustion engine vehicles, and that really isn't a lot of time to develop whole new technology. I think there are different economies in play, different scales of economy, different levels of geography that needs tackling. The typical opposition to electric vehicles is around the cost of them, which is typically higher at the moment than a combustion engine vehicle. The range, is it enough? And particularly on far-flung geographies, that could be an issue. And the charging infrastructure that's required to charge all of these vehicles that are going to be on our roads. For a highly developed, very rich country, that is quite a challenge. For some of the less developed countries, it's going to be an absolutely huge challenge. And I think you're seeing particularly some of the opposition coming from companies that are either hugely embedded in developing countries where they know that the markets may not move fast enough for them to be able to sell these vehicles, or countries where they have high dependency perhaps on coal-fired power stations to make the energy. It's no good really putting electric vehicles on our roads and then powering them with energy coming out of polluting sources. So there's a huge societal shift that needs to be undertaken, and I think a lot of countries and companies are struggling to see 2040 being a realistic goal for achieving that switch.
Okay, Jim Holder from Haymarket Automotive. Always good to get your analysis. Thank you for that.